Hi, I'm Khalifa, and today I want to do a quick tutorial on how to configure the AWS CLI on your local machine. I know we have access to the Cloud Shell, which is great, but sometimes when I'm at home and I need to do more advanced things, I need some more power or I need some more software. I like to run it locally on my machine. So let's go ahead and jump into this tutorial real quick. Alright. Here you'll get instructions on how to use different parts or configuring different aspects of the command CLI. I'm not going to go into this, but I'm just going to show you how I set it up on my machine. So the first thing I'm going to do is log into an AWS account that I use for training. And the first thing we're going to do when we get in here is we're going to jump over to IAM. You can use set up a user in IAM Identity Center. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep it a little bit old school and go ahead and set up a new user for this test tutorial. I'm going to call it Architect. I'm going to be showing everything on this tutorial, but by the time you get to see this video, all the credentials will be deleted. So don't worry about me showing things on the screen. You're not going to be able to use them later. I'm going to go ahead and add this user to an admin group. I suggest you, if you're doing this for real, you add the user with the least amount of privileges that it needs to do to perform whatever it needs to perform on your machine. But for tutorial's sake, I'm just going to give it all the power it needs. Create user. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to go and create a role for this user. I want to create a new role. It's going to be for the account. I'm not going to need MFA or anything like that or external IDs. I'm going to give it administrative access. And then, but again, use least privilege. Go down to next. And now I'm going to give it a name. I am going to give this name Architects. Create the role. Okay, so now we have a role and we have our user. What I need to do now is I need to go back to my user and I'm going to create some programmatic credentials so I can run commands from the CLI. The next thing I need to do is go to the security tab and then go to access keys and create an access key. I'm going to be using the command line interface. It's going to suggest me to use Cloud Shell, and most of the time that's fine. Use the AWS CLI version 2, enable authentication with the IAM User Identity Center. But this is just a regular IAM role. I haven't done that yet. So maybe that'll be another tutorial for another day. I'm just going to confirm that there are other options that I'm just going to skip over. I'm just going to do it old school. Go to next. Give this role set the description tag. It's optional. I'm going to delete this user anyway, so I'm just going to skip that part. Okay, so now we got our access keys. Now the next thing we need to do is set up our configuration locally. I'm going to just manually set this up with my hand so you can kind of see what happens behind the scenes. I'm in my home directory and I'm going to make a directory called .aws. I'm going to cd into that AWS into that directory, and then I'm going to open it up with code. Popped over on my other screen, so let me grab that. Alright, having a problem grabbing screens today. Grabbing windows, come on, you got it. Alright, there we go. Alright, and the first thing I'm going to do in this file is create a file called credentials. This is where I'm going to store those credentials I just created. Make sure I spelled that right. And I'm going to create a default section. I'm going to copy my credentials in here. And I'm going to set the output of the defaults. I'm going to default to text output. And then I want to actually grab my access keys in secret. Going back to the browser window, I'm going to copy this. And actually, I can't remember what is it? AWS access _ key or something like that. It should be in here somewhere where I can see those. Yeah, right here. I just need these two values here. And I'm creating a different user there. So I'm going to give it a different name. I'm going to call it, we got this wrong window open. Wrong window. All right, got too many windows open. I'm going to call it architect. Sometimes I use the same name in different accounts. So I'm going to specify this is my dev account. All right, so I'm just kind of tagging that a little bit to let me know what this is for. And then I need to go grab the actual access keys, the secrets from the console, copy that. Now again, I'm going to show the secret on screen, but by the time you get to see this, or that key will no longer be valid. So let's go ahead and save that. Now the next thing to do is we need to create a profile that we can assume. I'm going to create a config file for AWS, and I'm going to create a profile, and I'm going to call that architect dev as well to match it up with the access keys that I have in the credentials file. I'm going to specify a role ARN. I think I want to use that role that I created, and then I also want to specify my source profile. Equals to architect dev again. So let's go ahead and copy the ARN for that role that we created in IAM. There's the architect's role, and I want to copy that ARN. So let's go ahead and paste that in. Copy the wrong thing. Paste that in, just like that. Okay. All right. Now the next thing to do is to run a check to see if AWS is installed. Nope, I haven't installed it. So let's go ahead and download and install AWS. Let's go ahead and install this for a second. Downloads. Next. Accept. Next. Next. Install. Yes. All right. So once that's done installing, we're going to need to do two other things to set this up. All right, finish that. Nope, I'm going to need to close this out and open it again. Cool. So what we need to do now, in order for us to actually use those access keys and that role that we specified, we're going to need to set the environment variable called AWS profile. Because if I try this command here, I'm going to get nothing. So what I can do is I can specify env Windows profile environment variable, spell that correctly, and we'll specify our architect dev role, or dev profile. So now when I type AWS, yep, I get my command. All right, so there's one more step that I like to take when I'm running things. So I don't like to run everything on my host machine all the time. So because sometimes I need other software like Node.js or Python or some different versions of those. So I like to use Docker containers. So I'm going to show you really quick how I use Docker containers to how I extend those credentials to my local Docker containers so that I can run all kinds of environments and mess around with whatever setup I need to mess around with in AWS and run CLI commands against. So let's go ahead and go back to the command line. I'm going to go to PowerShell. I'm going to make a directory called we're going to cd into that directory, and I'm just going to open this up in code again, and I'm going to switch to my display and camera. Yes, I trust this folder, and I'm going to add some files here. I'm going to add a Docker file. I'm going to go specify my base image. I'm just going to use Alpine. I could use Amazon Linux or something like that, but you're going to see really quickly that it's really fast to run things in Alpine, like Python and AWS CLI, the latest versions. Whenever I need those latest versions, it's just easier for me to run an Alpine container really quick locally, and then do some things and maybe build some Python 3.12 and push those lambdas up or something up to AWS. So, but you can use whatever you like. I'm going to use 3202. I'm going to run, and I'm going to apk add. I need to add Python 3, whatever version is the default right now, and then we're going to add pip as well. Expand that, and then we can add AWS-CLI. Okay, so that should take care of that. I don't like to run the build command manually, so I also like to use Docker Compose. So I'm just going to add a compose YAML file. I'm going to add services. I'm going to add a AWS-CLI image container, and then I'm going to specify the build command to build right here in this, and then I'm also going to specify the credentials that I want to map to the container, and I want to map the home directories.aws directory to, and this is the Alpine container, and as Alpine you're going to be default to root, so I'm just going to run root/.aws. So I want that home directory to map to the root directory so that those files are there. I'm going to make sure that also that since I'm on Windows, I probably use CRLF. That probably won't make a difference, but I'm going to change that to line endings, to Linux line endings. Save that. Credentials the same. Change those to LF. Boom. All right, so that takes care of that. So now I'm going to try to Docker compose, config, see if what it spits out. ls empty compose file. Did I not save? Yeah, I didn't save. I also want to make sure that when I start this container, it continues to run. So it's going to start with a shell. And that's just going to hang there until I Control-C out of it. Config. All right, so what do we got here? We got our services, AWS CLI container. We're going to build it from the Docker file in that directory. That looks right to me. Networks, we're not worried about that. TTY is true. Volumes, we're going to bind my AWS local directory to the one in the root. Yeah, that should do it. So let's go ahead and build that. Actually, we can just type up and it'll build it for us since that container doesn't exist on a local machine. All right, so as you can see, it's installing all of the software, installing pip, AWS, Python, exporting the layers, and we're just waiting for that container to run. And now we have an attachment. So we're going to do a docker ps-a to find the name of the container, and we can do docker execute, or basically we're logging into the container now. An interactive TTY terminal, and then we're gonna install ls. So now if I run AWS S3 ls, I'm unable to so okay, you can configure credentials by running AWS. So are my credentials there? So the AWS directory is there. Are the files there? Are the files there? So what I'm probably missing is the environment variable that I need. Yeah. So I didn't add that. So we're gonna exit out. I missed one step. I forgot to add the AWS profile environment variable. So we're just gonna add that here. So we're just gonna go environment. We call it AWS underscore profile, and then we specify again. I don't want to fumble fingers this, so I'm just gonna. We want the profile name here. Oh, switching to the wrong windows. Specify that. And now our environment variable should be there. So we're going to spin that up again, log back in, clear the screen a little bit, make sure that that environment variable is there. It is. So now when I run AWS S3 LS, I should get a list of S3 buckets. All right, cool, awesome. So that's pretty much it. And I can list my functions because I have administrative access and all that stuff. So that's great. So now this is a cool way. So if I wanted to, I could easily create another container and switch to Node.js or something like that. And containers are just a nice way and mapping your credentials into the container locally. It's your local machine, so it should be pretty safe unless you have a lot of people running around and using your machine. In that case, you might want to lock those down a little bit better because they are in plain text, and rotate those, and be sure to rotate those access keys every 90 days. And that will complete this tutorial, and I want to thank you for joining me. If this was helpful for you, just go ahead and like, but otherwise, thanks and goodbye.